Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer who is passionate about helping all of us to use the adversity and really difficult things in your life to help you grow and show up as the best version of yourself. I am joined by my producer, Aaron Bender.
Good afternoon. I don't know why I'm saying afternoon. It is afternoon. I royally messed that up. It's not like we practiced it for hours.
No.
We're rusty.
We're rusty. Yeah. We're going to unrust here real quick, though.
Our old gray bodies.
Oh, good
yes.
segue.
Oh, thank
Good
you very
segue.
much. Yes. So,
yeah.
We have a guest today, openly gray, Matt Thornhill.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about marketing to and making sure that the older population, America's aging population, is served. And so my question to you, how many of the clients of your firm, Moore Family Law Group, are on the older side, if you will?
You know, I never really thought about that in terms of like who's old, who's young or whatever until about a year. Actually, it was about a year ago. And I was actually, Forbes came a-calling and I answered the call, and they really wanted me to talk a lot about this issue of what is now being like coined. The term is coined. What is that phrase?
Coining the term.
Coining the term
phrase.
gray divorce, which I think is 50 or 55 and older of people getting a divorce. And, you know, again, like until then, I had never really thought about it as its own category. And truth be told, we do divorces for people all the way from 21 to, 80. I mean,
I was going to ask, who's the oldest?
Probably like 89.
Oh,
actually,
wow.
90. He had his 90th birthday before we actually finalized.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I don't know that there's really one specific age group that, we do more of than the next. I do think there's probably a lot of like midlifers. So maybe that is gray divorce. They're 50, like in their 40s or 50s. But there are different considerations for people that are approaching retirement age, in retirement. Like it is a different ball game. So I think, the work that Matt Thornhill is doing is probably very valuable. We are joined today by Matt Thornhill, who basically invented the concept of marketing to older adults and coined the phrase openly gray. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Holly. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration.
I had a feeling you were going to say that, but I said, I'm just going to go with it anyway.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
Sure. I like the sign behind your head, so clearly you invented that. So I'll give
Exactly.
you
I did invent Holly J. Moore on the Hollywood Hills. So that's not an exaggeration.
All right. I'll give you that.
Okay, so let's just start by asking you, what does it mean to be openly gray, which I think is like a great, very catchy phrase.
Well, thank you. And again, I borrowed it. I actually found the expression maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and it was by some women on Instagram who had decided to stop coloring their hair as they got into the 50s and 60s, and they were going to be openly gray. And I thought, oh, well, that's a great expression. I love it. But at the same time, I was also thinking about, we got to figure out a way to encourage older adults themselves to be positive about growing older and not, at the time, there'd been a huge influx of, I'll call it anti-ageism efforts popping up all across the country and all across the world. And they're important. You have to if there's ageism out there, you got to stamp it out, just like we stamped out the other isms. Yeah. Ageism is kind of the last one that's still allowed. Jokes as at the Academy Awards when they turn the camera to an older actor, they'll make some joke about them. And that's kind of still socially acceptable. But a group of folks over various places have started this whole anti-ageism stuff. And it's important. But it comes at it from the point of view of basically combative. You stop that. It's almost get off my lawn. You stop being ageist. I'm going to point out your ageism, and you need to stop that. And it's a bit combative and about you and your behavior, or them and their behavior. And again, while it's important to do that, I was thinking about it and said, there's got to be a positive way to go about this, because quite honestly, as the baby boom generation gets to be in their 60s and 70s, where they are now, they're going to own aging and think about aging differently than maybe last generations. And they're not going to put up with people calling them, making jokes about them being old.
Yeah.
But we do it to ourselves. We do it to ourselves all the time with,
Yeah.
over the hill jokes. And
Right.
anyway, and older people have always done that. So I saw the term openly gray and said, that's a term we can embrace. Obviously, we're borrowing it from the gay movement back in the 70s
Yeah.
and 80s when they came out of the closet. They said, look, here we are. We're gay. You need to accept us. We're going to be open about it. So openly gray to me was not about hair color or whether even you have hair. It's about attitude and mindset. Because the only way we're going to transform the culture around attitudes about aging is if we start with doing it with ourselves, with older adults ourselves. So we need to embrace an openly gray attitude and mindset and demonstrate it. And then other folks, younger folks, will treat us with respect and as deserved, as opposed to somebody who needs to be sidelined at this stage of life.
Right. So I have to say, looking at you, talking to you, like the thing that comes to my mind is I think women have been talking about this for a really long time. Like, the ageism and trying to not look older, coloring our hair, doing all the things to our faces to stamp out the wrinkles, things like that. You're a man. And I mean, it would appear. I mean, nowadays, maybe we're not allowed to say that. I don't know. Okay.
You're right.
But so I'm like, this is really interesting that a gentleman comes along and is kind of taken up this cause as something that you seem passionate about and that you're willing to kind of take a stand for. So, I mean, have you ever thought about that? Like, why does this interest you? Why did you sort of get involved with this?
Well, to be honest with you, I've always been always been in marketing and advertising. So I've studied consumer behavior my entire career. And I'm for the last 20 years before I doing what I'm doing now, I ran a think tank called the Boomer Project, which was designed to help marketers understand that people over 50 were still consumers.
Okay.
When boomers were still buying things. I wrote a book called Boomer Consumer.
The Boomer Consumer,
helping people understand that this market segment isn't dead yet. And as I now got into my 60s, I looked around and I saw that anti-ageism stuff and said, they've almost got it right, but there's another component to it that we need to put in here. Our culture has looked at older adults always as, modern culture looks at older adults as diminished.
Right.
And therefore need to be put out to pasture and stuff. Versus superior, as in with extra wisdom and experience and ingenuity and perspective on things. They should be valued. Well, they're not. And to me, it's kind of ironic because I remember when I was a kid, at 8, I wanted to be 12. And at 12, I wanted to be 16.
As a kid, you always want to be older.
At 16, I wanted to be 21.
Yes.
Well, by the time I got to 50, I realized, okay, there's value in older people. Somebody at 70 or 75, they've got, 25 more trips around the sun. So I need to feel good about being 50. And I need to think about, now I'm 65 and I want to be 80.
Yeah. Really?
Especially because the alternative, if I don't make it to 80, that's not good.
Well, that's true. But, that's really interesting that you say that because I just turned 44 and I feel really excited about it. Like, I am like, the 40s are where it's at. Like, it is awesome to have grown into this age. And I still feel like I'm 21, but you couldn't pay me to go back to 21 or even 30.
Right.
Like, I really have enjoyed, getting older. But the question that was kind of in my mind is like, is there going to come a time where that starts reversing? It's like when I'm 50, I'm like, man, I wish I was back at 45 or 44, or does it just continue to get better? And I'm like, yes, I'm 60. I can't wait till I'm 80, so I guess you've answered that question.
Well, no, that question is still a fair question because as you grow older, we all know the warranty runs out on some of the pieces and parts.
Right.
So yeah, when, I'm 65, but in my head, if you ask me how old are you in your head, I would say 45.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
physically, I'm not, but in my
Mm-hmm.
head, I am.
Yeah.
And my mother-in-law lived to 87, and she used to say when she was 85, I look in the mirror and all I see is the 35-year-old version of myself. And
Mm.
we're like looking at her going, well, you ain't 35, sister. But that's okay. That's a human thing, and we
Yeah.
all get there. You know, the thing we're trying to do with Openly Gray is as an advocacy organization, and by the way, my board of directors is mostly women, so
Okay.
it isn't driven by me per se, is that we want to basically give people practical things they can do to kind of stamp out ageism by being positive about it. So,
Okay.
for example, I'll give you two examples of things I want you to stop doing and one thing I want you to start doing.
Okay.
The stop doing is I want you to stop saying I'm having a senior moment when you can't pull up a factoid or a name when you're having in a conversation. It
Yeah.
happens to everybody.
Yeah.
It's not just an age thing. It may happen
Right.
more frequently when you get older, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
If we're saying it, we're denigrating ourselves
Mm.
as older adults, as a 65-year-old. What if instead I just said, hold on, the file's buffering, or I'm buffering, or it's uploading,
Yeah.
because that happens to us all, and we can relate to that, and that takes
Yeah.
age out of the equation.
Oh,
So
I
that's
love
a
that.
simple
Hold
thing.
on, I'm buffering.
Yeah, hold on, I'm
That's
buffering.
amazing.
And then the other one is we got to stop saying that people look something or they're however it is at her age.
Mm.
Like if I said to you, well, you look really good at your age of 44, is that a
Yeah.
compliment or is that an insult?
Right.
And
It's
it kind of
unclear.
depends on how old you are.
Mm.
But if we would never say that about any other group. We say it about people as they're older. You look good. You're in great shape for your age, or you're
Right.
still so talented at your age. We would never say you look good for a black woman,
Right. Right. Yeah, we would not say that.
or you're in great shape for a gay man. What? We
Yeah.
would never say that. So why do
Right.
we say it about people as they get older? So we got to
Mm.
stop doing that and
Okay.
just say you look good today,
Yeah.
or you're in great shape today, and just leave age out of it.
Out of it.
So that's behavior we can change ourselves that will start training people to behave that way with us. And
Yeah.
then the third thing is something I want you to start doing, which is accept your age. The fact that you volunteered you're 44 is a step in the right direction.
Oh, good. Okay.
I know people that are in their 70s and 80s that still won't tell me their age. And it's
Oh,
like, why? Are you ashamed of it? Are you
yeah.
embarrassed?
Yeah.
Now, maybe you'd prefer to be 52, not 72, but
Mm-hmm.
damn it, you're 72. You made it. Be proud of that.
Yeah.
Embrace that. And it's
Right.
actually healthier for you to do that. And, there's a researcher, a professor out of Yale named Becky Levy, who did a research study over decades, or analyzed research that was done over decades about people's attitudes about aging and growing older, and found that people who had a positive attitude about aging over a period of like 20, 30, 40 years
Mm-hmm.
lived 7 years longer than people who had a negative attitude about growing, who complained about it all the time. Oh, my back hurts, my knee hurts, I can't do
Yeah.
this, I can't do that. Be thankful, be
Yeah.
appreciative, be happy, and you will live longer. So there's a positive message about being positive about growing older. And
Right.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to get out there.
Yeah. Well, I think that really is in alignment with so many things where our minds are so powerful, So if we really appreciate the fact that we've gotten older, we've got some years under our belt, which means more wisdom and more experience and more things to draw on, and that's all a really good thing. Like the mind is very powerful, so I can definitely see how that's true. So let's kind of talk a little bit about the marketing aspect to this, because I know your work does, I don't know, is it accurate to say your work focuses on marketing to the gray population, or is certainly a part of what you do is the marketing aspect, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I have the advocacy organization, which is trying to, as a nonprofit, trying to change attitudes and do that. Separately, I'm part of an organization called openlygray.com, which is a for-profit, basically resource for marketers and brands who want to figure out how do we target and reach the 50-plus market.
Okay.
And it's an uphill battle because most marketing organizations target 18 to 49-year-olds or maybe 25 to 54-year-olds. And if you're over 50 or 55, you're dead to them.
Okay.
They don't care.
Why do the marketing agencies do that?
The probably the biggest problem is they're trying to kind of create new consumers, and they think that new consumers only come in at kind of 18 or 25, and they want to
Okay.
get them then make
Got
them
it.
brand loyal. And they think that older adults are kind of set in their ways. They're stuck in what they're interested in, and they're just not going to be interested in the products or services they have because they've already decided, I'm going to shop at Sears until I die.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
now
Until
you see
Sears
the
goes out of
problem with that.
business.
Yeah, now you see the problem with that logic. I mean,
Right.
Sears ain't around anymore. So
Right.
it's patently untrue that older adults are less more brand loyal than younger. In fact, the opposite is the case.
Oh.
But because younger adults are going through the first half of life, they're focused on trying to become someone and to fit in. So the brands that they buy are really an outward expression of who they are to their friends and community. This is the car I'm driving. This is where I'm going to live. This is the brand
Right.
of beer I drink, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. It's an outward expression of who they are so they can find their place to belong and fit in. When you get to be 50 and older, and this is not generational, it's the history of man. You kind of get to 50 and older, and you stop focusing so much on becoming someone and you focus more on being someone. And so you become more inwardly directed. So the
Okay.
brands and products that you use are the brands and products and services that work for you personally, and you don't care what your neighbor's doing.
Right.
So that means that, if we didn't feel that way, we'd still be all, committed to AOL and Napster,
Yeah, that's very true.
using Blackberries and shopping drinking Schlitz beer. It's like, and that just doesn't happen. We change
Right.
and grow. And this boomer generation has been marketed to since they were 5 years old. They were the first generation raised in front of the TV.
Yeah.
So marketers who are ignoring us are doing it at their own peril.
Right. That's kind of interesting. I mean, I'm definitely not a marketing expert, so, take it for what it's worth, but I would think the general consensus would be like boomers are the ones with the money. And so, it would be a worthwhile endeavor to market to them because they actually have disposable income to buy the products.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the 50 plus market in America today is 125 million strong. Okay. It's about almost as big as the under 50 market from a
Okay.
marketing standpoint.
Wow.
They spend $8 trillion a year on goods and services.
Right.
So let's say you're the chief financial officer at a big company, and the chief marketing officer is, talking about how am I going to grow the business? And the chief financial officer says, well, who are you targeting? And they go 18 to 49. And the chief financial officer says, wait a second, you're ignoring almost half the market. But that's what happens. That's what's happening.
Okay. So in a marketing discussion, what do 50 plus people care about that is different than under 50?
Well, a lot of that depends. You can't group 50 plus as to kind of one market segment, just like you
Okay.
can't look at 18 to 49 as one market segment. There are
Got it.
a gazillion different variations of it. A lot of it has to do with your life stage, what your needs are. I'm 65 and I still got a kid in college. So I'm
Okay.
different than my neighbor who's 65 and doesn't have a kid at home.
Right.
He's in a different life stage, so he's got different wants and needs than I do.
Okay.
I think what's interesting is that marketers today are kind of, again, they're just ignoring that older segment. And let me give you another kind of numbers-based reason why they need to pay attention. Actually, since 2011, there's been a number of the statistic that's been talked about in kind of the aging space that every day 10,000 baby boomers turn 65. And that number has been to kind of snap people into realizing that there's this age wave that's coming. And,
Yeah.
it's now 2025. It's going to end in 2030 when the last boomer turns 65. The
Okay.
problem with that number and the way that statistic has been shared is it makes it sound like it's a one-time event that ends with boomers. And that's not the case. Every day from now until 2060, according to the Census Bureau's projections, more than 10,000 people will turn 65. Every day. The Gen X generation is not smaller on an annual basis. It's smaller because it has fewer years in it than the boomer generation. And millennials is a larger generation because it's got more years attached to it. Every generation has got about 3.5 to 4 million people in it. I mean, sorry,
Okay.
every age year. Age 65, there's about
Yeah.
3.6 million. And if you do the math, that's 10,000 people a day. And my
Okay.
point is that this growth of people 65 plus is not a one-time event. It's going to happen for the rest of our lives and careers.
Right.
So it's a huge segment. But at the same, yeah, I'll put it in perspective. By 2030, 1 in 5 people in America will be over 65. Back 15 years ago, it was 1 in 7.
Okay.
In some states, it's going to be 1 in 3 people walking around are over 65. You can probably guess a couple of the states.
Yeah.
Florida,
Right. Yeah.
Arizona.
Yeah.
Actually, Maine is going to be 1 in 3.
Okay. Oh, that's I wouldn't anticipate Maine, but that's interesting. It's so cold in Maine.
But the other side of the coin is not just that we're growing older. At the same time, we haven't been having enough babies. Thanks to birth control coming on the market in 1965,
Yeah.
the birth rate in America has kind of flattened out, and it's actually starting to decline.
Right.
In order for a population to replicate year over year, every woman of childbearing year has to have on average 2.1 children.
Yeah.
And our growth in the last 40 years has been from immigration. We've been right at 2.1. For the
Right.
last 5 years, it's dropped. It's now 1.7.
Okay. Well, I did my part. I had 3.
Good for you. I had 4. So we're
Oh,
good.
okay. Okay.
Well, I contributed to 4.
Right. Yes.
But anyway, to kind of snap that into focus, the under 65 segment isn't growing. It's the same year over year over year over year. The 65
Okay.
plus is growing. So one way to think about that is for every child under 5, in 2010, there were 2 65 and older adults. In
Wow.
2030, so 5 years from now, for every child under 5, every one child under 5, there are 4 adults over 65.
Wow.
So think about the impact on our society and economy and culture. What are the priorities? Oh, let's build more child care centers.
Right.
No, let's build adult daycare centers.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, let's train more pediatricians. No, let's train geriatricians.
Yeah.
Let's
Interesting.
let's create more toys for tots using all this technology. No, let's create assistive devices for older adults
Right.
using technology.
Yeah.
So that there's lots of changes that are going to come because of this. It's not an age wave, it's an age shift where we've gone from having few old people and a lot of young to equal numbers of old and young.
Right. And
So that's
do you think that that is even going to change where there's going to be, well, I guess it can't change because young people have to become old people. So if we have less young people, we'll have less old people when it trickles down, right?
Yeah, but in some countries, the birth rate has dropped so much. And even here, we've got, young people are putting off having kids. They're having
Yeah.
fewer kids. The chart for South Korea right now is like this.
Okay. Yeah.
The chart for Greece is like this because they've been at 1.1 or 1.3. Do you remember that movie, Holly, My Great Big Fat Greek Wedding?
Yes. Yes.
Where all the relatives came to the wedding?
Yes.
Okay, by 2040, a 25-year-old Greek person getting married will have no brothers, no sisters, no uncles, no aunts. There'll be nobody at the
Wow.
wedding.
Oh my gosh, that's tragic.
They're an only child of an only child.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Huh.
So it's a population cliff that a lot of, especially Western countries, are facing. There's still population growth in Africa and in some of the Asian countries. China had a one-child policy for 40 years, and
Right.
they're like this. They're upside down.
Wow.
So it's going to change just what the priorities are in society and culture and what we're dealing with.
Yeah. So when you mentioned adult daycares, what it brought to my mind, and I had actually been thinking about it during this conversation, is, culturally, you mentioned it at the top of the show. Culturally, we don't value our our elderly the way some other cultures do. I mean, other cultures really revere them. And I have felt like in our country, well, not I have felt, I think it's pretty widely known. We don't have that same reverence for the elderly. And it seems we don't really have a good way to care for our elderly when they need care, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do we do about that?
Well, I'm trying to come up with some solutions for that. But it's a huge problem. We're going to have older adults living under bridges in 10 years
Yeah. Oh my
because there's no place
gosh.
to put them and nobody to care for them because they didn't have
Right.
kids. They don't have, relatives around.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't have a solution for it, but it's going to be an issue we're going to have to address as a
Yeah.
nation, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to take care of all these older adults. Now, importantly, one of the things we can do, which goes back to, okay, we have all these older adults, let's create all these products and services to meet them. How about we figure out how to engage them and activate them as a resource in our community?
Right.
People 65 and older should not be on the sideline. They should be on the front line because they've got time, maybe some money,
Yeah.
experience,
Right.
wisdom, ingenuity, all those things. It's like, okay, how do we turn them into an army because a lot of 65 feel like, okay, we're going to make it to 85 or 90. Now, when my
Yeah.
dad was 65, he never thought he was going to make it. He thought he'd be dead at 75. So he
Yeah.
retired, he traveled with my mom for 5 years, played with the grandkids for 5 years, and then got the call of the great beyond. I'm
Yeah.
65 and I'm like, that ain't going to happen until I'm 85. So
Right.
what am I going to do? What difference
Yeah.
can I make?
Yeah.
And communities and associations, organizations, companies ought to think about, okay, how do we leverage? Growing old is not a problem. Having more older adults is not a problem. It's an opportunity.
Mm.
It's in
Yeah.
fact it's a blessing because in the history of mankind, we've never had this. We've
Mm.
always had this.
Right.
So now that we
Interesting.
have this, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
So attitudes about the value of older adults is going to change. It's already changed. Let me ask you this. Do you like Bruce Springsteen?
I do.
Okay, he's 75.
Yeah.
When you were
Yeah.
25, if I said, hey, when Bruce Springsteen's 75, you're going to like him, you would go, he's not going to be relevant at 75.
Right.
But yet he is.
He is. Yeah.
So
But
already
let me
things are
ask you
changing.
this. Yeah. Let me ask you this, because this is actually something that my husband and I talk about in terms of like our kids and something that I've noticed that I think my parents have been disappointed by. And it's the Google, I call it the Google effect. Like rather, when I had babies, rather than go to my mom and say, "Mom, what do I do about this?" I could just Google it. And my husband and I talk about that now. It's like, yeah, our kids aren't going to be asking us for advice. They're going to be Googling it. They're going to be chat GPTing it. So what's the discussion around that? Because we've been talking about, yes, the older you get, the more wisdom you have to offer, the more insight. But is that relevant when we can go to chat GPT or Google to get answers? What do you say to that?
Well, I actually don't think that's a bad thing because it now frees you up and your husband up and your parents up to not have to worry about doing that, but can worry about other issues
Okay.
and contribute in other ways. I mean, I remember when I was young, coming up in the world of business, I had to remember phone numbers.
Yeah.
I don't have to remember phone numbers anymore.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and these tools should allow us to now figure out other ways we can spend our time that are more productive than just remembering phone numbers or
Right. Yeah.
worrying about telling my kid how to raise his kid.
Yeah.
As they're not
Okay.
going
I
to
like
listen.
that
Um,
perspective.
so that there's an opportunity there. Now I'll share a story. There was a psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm not exactly sure what his title was. A fellow by the name of Gene Cohen, who wrote a book called The Mature Mind, and in it he dispelled what psychologists for years had been teaching, that people go through different stages of life, developmental stages. Like Erik Erikson had a whole model, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and there were all these models about how people go through these various stages, and they all ended about 60. And he said, wait a second, we're not done at 60. People who live to
Yeah.
90 continue to grow and develop skills. And one of the things he concluded is that older adults have an ability to use kind of both sides of their brains, left and right, logical and feeling side, to come up with innovative solutions to things because the synapses are working differently at this stage of life. He calls it whole brain thinking.
Oh.
And the example he gives
I'm still waiting for all my synapses to kick in. I mean, even this morning, I'm like, guys, like things are not firing on all cylinders. So maybe I have that to look forward to.
Yeah. So that's a senior moment you want to have.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the example he gives is a 75-year-old husband and wife came to Washington, D.C. to visit their daughter who was working. They arrived midday at the Union train station, pouring down rain. Their daughter was at work. This is before the days of Uber, and there were no cabs. And they're like, how are we going to get to the apartment, which is, 4 blocks away or 5 blocks away without getting soaked? Well, the father saw a pizza parlor across the street, walked in and said, "You guys deliver?" And they said, "Sure." He goes, "Okay, I want a pizza at this address. You just got to take us with us." And that's an example of kind of whole brain thinking, problem
That's so
solving.
genius.
Yeah, that a
Yeah.
75-year-old would have that maybe a 25-year-old would never think about.
Right. Yeah.
Well, there's still going to be ways for us to contribute, even in a world of ChatGPT and Google and who knows what other things Elon Musk comes up with.
Right. Yeah. So, okay, in kind of closing, the burning question I have for you is, what do you tell those people who are kind of bummed about aging? I mean, physical things start to happen, stuff starts to hurt. My husband, like, his back went out, and I'm like, oh no, what did you do? He's a fireman, so you would hope the story is like, I was saving a life, and he was like, I was tying my shoe. So
Right.
what do we say to those people who are like, they are like bummed about getting older? How do we deal with that?
Well, there's a paradox, and like I said, the warranty runs out on some of the parts. There's wear and
Yeah.
tear, but there's also you just have to pro and con it with, okay, what do I now have? What's my kind of experience and wisdom and whatever that I've got that I didn't have when I was 30, that I
Yeah.
didn't have when I was 25. You're saying, I don't want to go back to being 30 again.
Right. Yeah.
What you do is, in reality, you do want to go back, but you want to take your 44-year-old brain back
Your
with you.
maturity and your insight and your mind,
Yeah.
absolutely, in
Yeah.
that 21-year-old body. Yes, that doesn't hurt.
I need to go back 15 years and buy Tesla stock myself, but that's,
Oh, I know. Yeah.
but the point is that you just have to decide what are the things you can control. You can control some of your health, but some of it you can't,
Right.
but do the things that you can control. And then the things that you can't control, you can control how you respond to it. Do I let it bring me down, or I just press on and figure out how to optimize it?
Right. Yeah.
It's up to the
And
individual.
now we know that if you think positively about it, you'll live longer and maybe hopefully live healthier too, because living longer isn't always like what we want, but we want to live longer and healthier.
Sure, it's about living having a longer, I don't know, health span versus just a longer lifespan.
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
all of us, again, when I was growing up, when you were 50, you were over the hill. You got the AARP card mailing, and
Yeah.
if you needed it. You needed help with things because you don't know anything at 50. And you steady decline down the hill. Us boomers got to 50 and go, wait a second. At first, I don't need AARP. And second,
Yeah.
I'm not going to die till I'm 100. I'm going to just keep going and going and going and going and going. And eventually, I'll drop off.
Right.
I'd like to live long and die fast.
Yes. That's what we want. Live long and die fast.
Right.
Yes. Oh, I like that.
Now, I do
Cool.
have a piece of advice to your listeners who are in marketing organizations.
Yes.
And that is that it is incumbent on you, if you want to grow your business over the next 15 years. You got to remember, if the under 65 or under 50 market is the same size year after year after year after year, the only way you're going to grow is to take business from somebody else, to take share out of another company or brand or service.
Right.
Unless you look at the 50 and older market, because that's growing.
Oh.
And if you're sitting here ignoring them, you're not even advertising to them because you think that they're not worth your time. They're not going to buy things. It's like, I don't know. I've got Apple products. I buy stuff on Amazon every day.
Yeah.
I'm always buying stuff. Like you said, we're the ones with the money.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
figure out that your growth in the future is going to come from people who are over 50. And related to that is the people who can help you do that are over 50 themselves.
Right.
Because at 30, I was working on Madison Avenue. I thought I knew everything about everything at 30.
Yeah.
And I could read the research report about how my 50-year-old consumers of a particular product were behaving. I didn't know diddly.
Right.
In hindsight, when I got to 50, it's like, it takes one to know one is really what it comes down to. That's why I've partnered with these other guys to do openlygray.com, is to help people figure out, okay, let me get somebody who's in that age mind, that mind space, to help me figure out how to talk to them. Because otherwise I'm going to do dumb things that 30-year-olds do when they're trying to do a commercial for a 55-year-old they think has one foot in the grave.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's very true. Excellent. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for the work that you're doing for the 50-plus crowd. Sounds like that's super valuable, and it's only going to get more and more valuable. So thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad I was able to help.
Absolutely.
And if people want to know more about Openly Gray, it's openlygray.org or openlygray.com, either one.
Okay, and we will make sure to include that and all the other relevant contact information in the show notes.
Great.
I've got just a little bit more to say. If you've gotten to any sort of age at all, aging can be a real bitch. But if you have a positive mindset around it, it makes it so much better, just like everything in life. I mean, that sort of mindset, that perspective of being positive and sort of having an attitude of gratitude for these things really can make such a huge difference in your life. So we're all aging, nobody's escaping it, but be positive around it and never forget, you were made for more.